In this section, we're going to very briefly explore a number of different design techniques that we can use to help sketch out and define our interface and our interactions with the user. So, as far as design techniques go, there are lots and lots of different ones that can be used, and we'll look at a number of different ones here. Workflows, task flows, sitemaps, wireframes and prototypes. Now, to a degree, some of these you will already be familiar with, if not all of them, in terms of we can use these as tools to help us design and implement software. When we're thinking about our implementation model, when we're thinking about the functionality and algorithms and how data flows through the system, all of the things we're thinking about here are of use. Equally, we can use these types of tools when we're thinking about our interactions with the user and our sort of user interface design considerations. So whilst the tool is the same, we're applying it to a different problem. One about how we interact with the users, and the other one about, well, how do our algorithms and data interact and come together? Now, there's a wide range of different techniques. Like I said, this is only touching upon them at a very brief, very high level status. You can delve into whatever these you wish to do so, and there's different sort of approaches and tools you can use for all of them. We'll start off first of all with the workflow model. And this gives us a way of capturing, if you like, the flow of information or the steps within a decision-making process. And typically it uses a flow chart, nothing more than that. And that type of flow chart, well, you can see the stuff that it includes here. It's the overall goal or outcome we're trying to do. It's the starter trigger condition. It's working out about dependencies. It's thinking about decisions and actions that need to be made along the way. It's thinking about errors or exceptions that could happen. All of this will be quite familiar, but the key and really important thing is that when we're applying this to user interaction, we are thinking about this from the user's perspective, not from the implementation model's perspective, but from the user's perspective. So we are thinking about, well, what is the user's goal? What will trigger or start this for the user? What types of decision or action will the user need to make? And if something goes wrong, if the user makes a mistake or potentially the system, what steps are we going to expect the user to take then to correct or to modify or to overcome from that particular problem? So it's very much focused on the user interaction because, as I said many times, but I'll keep on iterating because it's really important. When we're thinking about interface design, we are designing our interface around the needs of our users. Sitemaps and task flows, they're a little bit more refined. Sitemap you'll all be familiar with. It is just a representation of, be it pages or screens or different views about hierarchically how our application all fits together. In terms of interface and interaction design with the user, this is something that needs to map onto their mental models about how they think, how they would perceive, how they would expect the site to be grouped together into structured. Now, under the surface, in terms of the actual layout, that may be something completely different, but we need to make sure that in terms of what we present to the user, it maps cleanly onto their mental models. Like with task flows, this is a little more refined. It's down at a specific area. It's a series of steps or activities or operations that we would ask of our user as they're performing certain tasks. And we want to make sure they are defined in terms of those user types of interaction. And we also, these are the things then we'll be optimizing in terms of making sure for the common flows through this, they are as efficient, as straightforward, as easy as they possibly can be. Wireframes and animations then, they're at a sort of conceptually different level. They're thinking about how things look like. A wireframe is a low fidelity visual prototype, so it's just a sketch of what the interface looks like. It highlights in sort of a sketchy form the sort of the key elements. It positionally aligns things as where they would sort of typically be. Now, the whole idea of using a low fidelity approach of a wireframe, of a sketch, is that you do this not with the intention it's going to be, I do it and it's done. you do it with the intention that you're going to come up with lots of different iterations. You'll explore different options. You'll consider some things, you'll throw away other things. So you want to make it as easy to do this as you possibly can, because the expectation is you'll explore variations, keep some, throw some away, develop those, keep some, throw some away. So we want to make it easy, because that makes it easier then for us not to be invested in it, but to be happy to modify, to change, to vary. Annotations are simply nothing more than the notes that tell us about the wireframe. Because the wireframe is sort of quite crude and quite simple in terms of expression, sometimes it's useful if we're sharing our wireframes with others to put in a little note just to say, well, this is what type of image would go here, here's what this section is for. It just helps that type of understanding of the interface. So when creating wireframes, I mean, it's mentioned in the last slide, it is good to almost start off sketching on paper, and to do so quite iteratively, quite quickly, quite crudely, under the principle you throw away things you don't like, you keep things you do like. And when I say you, I mean it's good to do this as a team effort. It can be good to think about from the persona's perspective. All of those types of things apply. Whenever you've got down to the point of the sketching, you're thinking, okay, these ones here seem to work for our users. It may be useful then to move over to using a digital tool, which enables you to develop the wireframe in a bit more detail. We're still not looking for a polished setup, far from it, because we're not done, but we're adding a bit more detail to it. We're still expecting ourselves to refine this, to change it, to look at different options, to keep some, to throw away others. So we're not yet at the point of tying things down. In fact, we tie things down for a long time, because we go through user testing and all of this. So we still want to be able to make changes easily. Whenever we've gone through that phase and we have something where we're thinking, yeah, this is looking a bit better, we're happy now, we could probably put this in front of users and real users and to see what they think about it. Then we can add in more detail, we can mock things up, we can put in visual images, visual elements. We're not necessarily attaching any functionality to this, we're just providing a more accurate mock-up of how it would look. And at that point, we're kind of merging into the area of prototyping, where we have something that would be reasonably reflective of how the actual end interface would look like. And at that point, it's a good point then to get users involved, to think about, to analyze, to see how they would interact with or approach that interface that has been developed. And again, to iterate as need be. So this does link into prototyping. It's all about creating, mimicking, or testing aspects of our product with the users. Again, it's not a job done, it is an iterative process. We go into prototyping really under the expectation that the feedback we will get from users, we will use that to change, to refine, to improve the interfaces that we have done. We do not go into it on an expectation the user is simply going to look at it and go, that's brilliant, job done. So again, that process of iteration is a key element of it. And any type of UX design, we should have prototyping involved in this, getting our users involved. Now, it doesn't have to cover the whole product. We might want to focus on those key interactions, the key things that are commonly encountered for most of our users as expressed through our personas, and to focus on them to make sure we're doing them really, really well. For the more sort of edge cases that are unlikely to occur that often, again, we may not invest that much in terms of close scrutiny with our users to understand in terms of flow and aspects. When we're thinking about prototyping, we could do it using paper, we could do it digitally as well. Paper prototyping is fine, it's helpful, you can print things out, you can move them around, you can let the user shift, you can see where the user would identify or look at. All of those types of aspects apply. So paper prototyping is actually useful. You can also do it in a whiteboard as well. Ultimately, it does have some limits in terms of scalability, because you have to either draw things out or print things out, and that's not as easy to scale up or to iterate as maybe some other techniques. Digital prototyping, there's a wide range of different types of tool available. So things like Adobe XD or InVision. We're actually just going to use PowerPoint, because that's actually quite a good tool to use, and we can mock up a number of different platforms inside that. And at this point, we want to make sure we're staying well away from anything that is too implementation oriented, because we want to make sure, certainly in this course, we focus on what we think our users what's going to be important to them. So that's all I want to cover inside this particular section, when we're looking at some of the techniques that we can use to help model and develop and refine the types of interactions and the interfaces that we present to our users. In the next section, we're going to tie everything together in terms of looking at all of our modeling, looking at these different techniques to set out a number of steps that we can step through that will help take us from an initial idea all the way through to prototyping.